to get started by hearing a little bit more from each of our panelists, a little bit about themselves and their backgrounds. Dr. Kim, why don't we start with you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim, and I am the Deputy Director at Future Focused Education here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And what we do is we really work with high schools across the state on school transformation using specific levers to create change, to create systematic change. Before that, I was the co-founding director of the LEAP program, an alternative licensure program across the state of New Mexico, an alternative licensed teacher preparation program, New Mexico's largest teacher prep program. And then also, I'm the vice chair of the Indian Education Council here in New Mexico. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I was born and raised on the reservation.
So happy to have you here, Kim. Thank you so much for joining. Lakita, I'm going to throw it to you next for a quick intro.
Greetings, everyone. I am Lakita Herring. I'm the RTI advisor in the Memphis-Shelby County Schools area. I currently support teachers in planning and development, professional development for teachers who are providing interventions in the areas of reading and math.
Wonderful. And Magali.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm currently working with assistive technology. I've been doing that over the last 8 years for the Clark County School District, and I work really with the whole school district, providing Bookshare, other reading and writing accommodations, and really implementing assistive tech and whatever, anything the kids really need. And I also like to work for Bookshare as a Clark County outreach coordinator, working with other organizations and providing awareness of this great resource.
Yeah, we are so happy to have all three of you here today. We are super lucky to have both Magali and Lakita here with us, who are, like Magali mentioned, outreach coordinators for Bookshare. So if you are in the Las Vegas area or the Memphis area, we would love to put you in contact with Lakita or Magali. So reach out to us and we're happy to make that intro as well. So as we mentioned, we're here to talk today about culturally responsive teaching and how to incorporate those methods into your instruction in your classrooms. Cultural responsiveness is an approach to teaching that recognizes and really values the cultures and the backgrounds of all students. We're here to talk about creating a classroom environment where all students feel welcome and respected and valued. And I'd really love to start, Kim, if maybe you would mind sharing a little bit more about the practice of culturally responsive teaching and what that can look like in a classroom.
Yeah, so culturally responsive teaching to me is also culturally responsive and culturally affirming. And it isn't just a program or curriculum or an intervention that you can just roll into a classroom. It really has to become like the way of being as a teacher. Like it's who you are as a teacher. And then that spreads into the culture and climate of a classroom, accepting individuals as they come as their whole selves. Mm. And as they enter education, they get to come as themselves and know that their background, experiences, and culture is valuable, and their ways of knowing and learning is valuable. And then leaving the education system with all that intact too, instead of the education is forcing them to go into a different way of being, right? So it's coming in as your whole self and then leaving with that intact too as part of culturally responsive. And then real quick about what that looks like in the classroom. I mean, that looks like really having an accepting, a teacher understanding systems and systems of the classroom and systems that marginalize youth, and understanding intersectionality. So when we talk about culture, we're not just meaning race and ethnicity, right? There's a lot of different cultures out there that we as humans belong to and we have. So it's knowing that, learning that, and then accepting that, and then building that in the classroom environment. That's what it is to me.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that and kind of giving us a little basis as we're, expanding this conversation a little bit. One of the things that we kind of talked about as we were talking about what we wanted to talk about today is the difference between multiculturalism. So, just supporting holidays from every culture, or having a couple books of an author of color and really diving into the practice of cultural responsibility. And I would love to hear from you all kind of talking a little bit about that difference and what kind of your thoughts around that practice of cultural responsibility and how that actually looks maybe a little bit more in depth than people might expect.
I'll jump in, Amanda. When we think about cultural responsiveness and multiculturalism is just the existence of different cultures in various areas. Of course, we know we are a multiculturalistic society. We are very tolerant of multicultural or different cultures in our community. However, when we talk about that cultural responsiveness, we're talking about making them part of the community. What Kim said, that being, in order for a person to be, you have to be understanding, accepting, and being a part of that assimilation of their culture within the whole community. And that's the piece that we're missing, just that it's more than basic assimilation. It's accepting, honoring, respecting, sharing, and engulfing our presence in each culture so that we don't strip one another of our identity, but we share that capacity that we have to build one another together. And so we really want to get out of the phase of being multiculturalistic to being more culturally responsive.
That's great. I love that. Anything that Pim or Magali you would want to add there? That was really wonderful.
I mean, I think that's pretty spot on.
Right.
And it goes to us being aware. It goes to us being able to recognize those issues in our community, as well as being vocal and being an advocate for culturally responsive teaching inside the classrooms, as well as community organizations in any areas that touch, the people within the community. So it's not only in one arena, it's in every facet of our life that we have to continue to build on cultural responsiveness.
Yeah. And I just want to add that community piece of, back in the day when I was being trained to be a teacher, it was about multiculturalism, right? And I love the way you said it, Lakita, about we don't want students, I think you said this, not to shed their identity, right? Like they have to shed it in order to be accepted into a learning community. Like if you can show that you only learn this way, you can be a good test taker this way, you can do things this way, you can read these authors, you can synthesize this set of information from the American canon, then you're a learner, right? And that is not culturally affirming or culturally responsive. And I just think that's important to, when we talk about the greater community being culturally responsive and affirming, is bringing the community in, bringing students, families in, and not having them shed their identity to be part of this school center, right? Like we invite them in and we learn from them. They don't learn from us. We learn from them because their way of knowing and learning is quite valuable.
I love that. Do you have any examples, any of you, of like, what can that actually look like in a school? Magali, I see you've unmuted.
Yes, I like to jump in with my background with assistive technology. Oftentimes we want to categorize students with, to fit in a box. This student has physical disability, they're visual, they have ID. So really understanding that and having the expectations that students can learn and having those high expectations just as a general ed, and also giving them a voice, giving them an option. There's such a thing called, like, for universal design learning, the tool belt theory, where students can have options, have a list of tools that are available for them, and they can choose from that what works for them, so providing parents also, we do come from different backgrounds, but there's different needs for students. We all learn very different, and having that available for them and making that aware is very, very important when it comes down to the classroom. And even the students see themselves when I go into the classrooms, like, hey, I might speak a different language or whatnot, but when it comes down to learning or reading specific books, I like books being read out loud to me and this certain voice because I come from this background, and or a specific speech rate, and giving them that empowerment, just, I don't know, I feel like it opens up their eyes of, to seeing how they can all come together and learn in different ways. So
I love that. We had a session earlier where the UDL team used the phrase a lot, of student voice and choice, and just allowing them to be a part of those conversations. That you've all kind of touched on that, but really great. I really love that. Anybody else want to hop in there around, this question of like, what can cultural responsibility in a classroom or in a school look like really tangibly? How can that look in your school?
I have a practical example. I'm sorry. I have a very practical example. When we think about music class, each nationality, each different culture have a different type of music. And so incorporating various types of music inside a music class can stem or start that formation of accepting or embracing cultural responsiveness, because all students like music, all students like different type of music. But if they understand the origin and the history and the rationale behind that type of music, it can start to create more of a conversation between the students. And it's very basic in what we're doing that can kind of build the to start that foundation for that cultural responsiveness. So we think about blues, we think about rock and roll, we think about folklores, we think about spiritual songs, we think about just classical music. All of those stem from a different type of culture, and the presence for why these types of music were created. And it can start a bigger conversation in that learning. Like I said, when you think about how can you bring people in from the community, think about local artists. They would love to come into the school to play their music, to tell what this music stems from, or the history, the origin, what's the meaning behind that, and create that conversation that we need to be having in order to build the foundation for what we're doing. So that's one way that you can think about schools or teachers incorporating or starting to build a foundation for cultural responsiveness, something as simple as music.
Well, and I think it's such a great point too, of it's not just listening to music from other cultures, but using that as a jumping off point for deeper understanding, knowledge sharing together, bringing in external experts. Wonderful. And Kim, I cut you off. I saw you unmuted there.
No, I think that is really important about the starting place, and also hearing student choice, student voice, going back to that example of we give students so much content and then we tell them what to do with it, right? Instead of them giving them voice and choice of what does this mean to me, and how does this relate to the world around me, and how can I be a change maker in my own community, right? Down from elementary all the way up through high school, our kids are brilliant. They have a set of critical thinking skills. So when we say kids can't read, kids can't achieve, usually we're saying kids can't decode in the English language, right? That is sometimes, and I'm not saying all the time, but many times when people say kids can't achieve, what we mean is kids are struggling with decoding in the English language. But when we give them the tools like assisted technology, now we're seeing that when they have that and the decoding struggle's gone, they actually can do all this other ways of thinking, of critical thinking skills and sets of, and solve challenges. So I want to give a concrete example of what this looks like in a community. So we have the majority of districts in New Mexico are rural. So there's one rural district. We have the high school students who have chosen for a capstone project to demonstrate their understanding of economic issues in their rural community. There's no business opportunity, so kids have to leave for work. So they're putting together a research project of why there's a lack of businesses in their community. What are the root causes? And now holding their town mayor and legislators accountable to create more business opportunities. And the kids have done this whole project, created this whole movement in a district that usually we say, oh, they aren't high achieving. That's pretty high achieving to me. right? And it's relevant to them, and we've given them tools and strategies, and now they've created something and they're change makers. To me, that's what school should be about.
I totally agree. And goes back to our keynote this morning, which was really about project-based learning, which kind of ties all of this together too, in that if you allow students to have more say in identifying the projects they're working on and identifying the issues that they want to look at, not limiting those things, that also gives them more of an opportunity to, be reflecting their own cultural identity in the work that they're doing for school as well. I don't want to cut anyone off if there's anything else to add here before I kind of shift us a little.
I had something to say. So I think that's a great example in, involving the students within the community. Like with the Clark County School District, we have a lot of events. There's a lot of other organizations that are out here that support students with disabilities. So like, for example, we celebrate Paralympics at the school district, and we get other students involved, and having students being involved in different events like this and seeing different cultural events or whatnot, that's the way where students can open up and see that there's something else besides what they grew up seeing all the time, and kind of getting an idea just of what it is. And they try different foods, they get to ride I don't know, like sometimes even for like the Paralympics, they get to use some of the wheelchairs, they get to see some of the assistive technology devices. So I think just it goes in many forms, but just delving students in these type of events is just very, very important.
Totally. And in a way that gets to be positive and fun. And those are the things that really stick for students too, when they get to be hands-on involved in a really enjoyable experience. Kim, I think you touched on this earlier, but I'd love to hear from all of you about how we might be able to encourage these practices with our colleagues and peers. Like, maybe you feel like you're really doing a great job of this in your own classroom, but how can we foster a sense of this school-wide or district-wide? How can you encourage these practices, with the people around you?
Is that for me or for anyone?
For anybody. Sorry, we're happy to have anybody jump in here.
I was waiting for Lakita. She works with professional development. Okay, I'll go first and I'll be brief. Because I'm such a systems person, that's a complex answer, right? It's not just as easy of like, hey, let's try this. It's because we've been so ingrained as educators when we were taught how to be teachers, like it's been so ingrained of this is how education looks. What's the input? What's the output? And we've been held accountable if we don't get that output, we're penalized. And it's just this like repeat cycle. Our kids are penalized, our communities are penalized. We have bad story narratives around us. But if any of us who are teachers know how frustrating that is, because we know our students are brilliant, they're smart, and a test tells us does not capture that, right? That's not our story. So, like I said, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I think
rabbit holes are fine around here. We're happy.
I think it takes strong leadership, school leadership, to really, because it's not as simple as just want me and my teacher next door or my PLC. It takes strong leadership to say this is important. And as educators, we have to understand the history of our profession. We have to understand the motivation behind our profession in the 1900s and how we haven't moved away from that since. And we have to start tearing down those systems. So it's not just, let's do this fun project-based learning. Yes, let's do that and engage kids, but let's start tearing down and understanding the systems that we've all been manipulated to uphold as educators. And we have to start learning those. And that takes strong leadership at a school level, district level, state level. So complex answer, but
Complex problem, complex answers. That's okay.
I love it, Kim. I love it. And where we have to thinking about, like you said, in my area of professional development, we always think about educate, advocate, and motivate. First, we have to be educated on what's wrong. We have to be educated on why it's wrong. And we have to be educated on how to get it right. Now, once we educated, you have to make sure you advocate. There's no good in having this knowledge when you're not willing to sacrifice and advocate against the things that are wrong and encourage those to do right. When you're advocating, you're not just advocating in your PLCs, you're not just advocating in your classroom or your school building. You're advocating against policies. Kim said systems. You're advocating against systematic oppressions. So this is a very big task that requires a lot of sacrifice, a lot of education, a lot of, we would say, funds when we're trying to break down systematic or political arenas, as well as being that one who is willing to sacrifice to be on the advocating for these injustices that we see, especially dealing with cultural responsiveness in the classrooms. And then you have to motivate people, because if we become assimilated, we as educators, we're used to going on. This is the system that we know. This is the system that we do. This is what's comfortable to us. Of course, you know, educators don't like to be uncomfortable. We don't like change. So therefore, we have to be able to motivate those who are around us, those who now have the know-how, the well-being, the education to know that, hey, I identified these issues. Now we know how to work within our issues to make sure they're correct. And so when we think about what should we do, professional development, I can't allow you to be, as my boss would say, a shooting cannon out there trying to show someone or do something. We have to know what to do. We don't have to properly do it. We have to make sure that we're respecting everyone in manners. We still have to respect the laws and things of that nature. So, but of course, we have to know what to do and how to do it and what's the correct way to do it, because we don't want to be disrespectful in a manner, but we do want to make sure we're advocating so that we are heard. And once we are heard, we want to make sure there's some changes behind what we're advocating. And then once you're heard, you want to make sure that you are being motivated to continue this process throughout life, you know, because if you take on a task like this is a lifetime commitment. Because, you know, we go in cycles, we're back and forth. You reach a comfort level, you think it's good there, and you stop moving. So this is going to take continuous momentum to continue to move and drive, to continue to build this cultural responsiveness inside of our classrooms, our schools, our communities. So really educate, advocate, and motivate. That's the way we're going to make those changes.
I think this is perfect, and it goes hand in hand with, I feel like a lot of teachers and especially administration, you know, throughout the years, what we've learned the most is to be adaptive and be innovative with what technology has brought to us now and the way we are learning, which is very different than the structured format of like you read out of a textbook. Now, our, you know, our society has changed so much with allowing the students, you know, get information in different ways through different outlets, not just a textbook. Also, by being involved in like our current political events, like not events, but like information, like GPT is changing everything, the way we learn. That's, you know, how we're being culturally responsive to what the world is bringing upon us. And, you know, I think it comes down, you know, was working with the school district to your school administration of how they want to proceed the school district and how they're adapting towards these type of changes. And this is how our students are learning. And so we as a society like need to get, you know, very involved and be very adaptive to what the changes are bringing. We can't just teach how we used to before.
Such a great point, Magali.
And I just want to honor the chat of these questions. or comments about teachers. We do really, I'm like trying to figure out how to make it say it. Every educator really wants good outcomes for kids, right? All of us sign up for this. And so I think going to one of the comments about we're hungry for it, we're ready for change, we feel it. After the pandemic, teaching is different. Like it feels different because our kids are needing either so much more or experience hard things. So I think it's a good point that our teachers need to be modeled this. They need to be given opportunities to go to professional development like you guys are offering. They need to see how this actually looks in the classroom. Someone asked a really good question about how does choice in the classroom look and how is it implemented in an inclusive way? And that's hard, but I will really say, in my perspective, is you have to set really good outcomes, right? Targets of what do I want my students to learn from reading Romeo and Juliet? Do I want them to love Shakespeare? Probably not going to happen, right? That's not my intention, isn't for them to love Shakespeare. Why are we reading it then? Do I want them to understand the messaging that Shakespeare was trying to give about teen mental health during that time? And they were being silenced. And then do I want them to now figure out, be able to analyze the text for that? And then do I want them to be able to cross it over to today, how teen are being silenced in schools for the mental health crisis that's happening? And then do I want them to design a project or create social change around that? So I'd have to line my outcomes, build a rubric, and then that allows student choice, right, of what the product is and the different paths. I hope that's helpful.
I think that's such a great example of to answer that question. And Lakita and Magali, if you didn't see the question in the chat, it was how would one impact choice of classroom materials and how they're implemented in an inclusive way? If there's anything you would want to add to that as well.
I would like to add that in the district that I have, everything has to be district approved. Of course, I'm in the state of Tennessee, and our government has a lot of say on a lot of the reading content and a lot of things that goes inside of the classroom. So it's just about you knowing, you do have to work within the confines of the system, but you just have to be really intentional about the, like Kim said, the outcomes of what you want students to do. You can't embed choice in, you know, the materials that you utilize that's within your confines. And I think that we have to be willing to bend the rules, not break the rules a little bit in some situations in order to get those intended outcomes. But like I said, that's that part that we that's that sacrifice for change. That's that part where you advocate for change. And so it takes work, it takes commitment in order to make those things to happen. But of course, we have to make sure that the vendors who are providing us the resources are culturally responsive. We have to make sure that we as teachers go to textbook selection meetings or go to when they're doing RFPs to be part of that conversation, to say, hey, I don't think that this book or this vendor is representative of what we're trying to do in the respects of culture responsive. I don't think that this vendor or these materials will allow us to build a culture that we need to move forward. So be a part of the textbook selections, be a part of, you know, adopting different readings within your schools, within your communities. Be a part of your book fair. You can speak to vendors, hey, when the book fair come into your community, hey, can you please have books that in an array of different nationalities, different cultures, different languages and varies, because I know wholeheartedly when I go to my son's book fair, all the books are in English. Those are the ones that are on exhibit, but he does have a lot, he goes to a very diverse school, and a lot of those students book materials are not, present at the book fair. So something as simple as that, just speaking to your vendors, and you have to make sure you're spending your money, you're spending your time, you're signing off, have a voice in those areas. So that's one way, but I know there's some restrictions, but we just have to be a part of the planning, be a part of those committees, be a part of that conversation when those things are coming on. You have to start somewhere and change as small as adopting one book this year, adopting 2 books, or like you said, integrating different capstone projects.
Thanks, Lakita. That's really great. I'm just kind of soaking this all in myself. This is a really wonderful conversation. Magali, is there anything that you would want to add to that?
I think just like, for example, the tool belt theory, just empowering the students with having different resources that they can choose from, like, and even providing, like, Bookshare is such a great resource with providing all sorts of books, like in different languages. I know, a lot of the students, when they know that they have this resource, they're like, can I have this book? Can I have this other book? Can you add this on my reading list? And so that empowers them to know, like, oh my gosh, I have like this platform where it has all the books I could possibly ask for without having to go to library, do all this extra work, and I could get them in different languages. Like for me as a Spanish speaker, I wish I would have had specific books in my language, like in Spanish. And because I actually enjoy reading in Spanish, like a Spanish book, that's made in English is not the same as, honestly, in my native language. And I speak for many other languages as well. Like, so I think just giving them those opportunities, you have this available, and them being able to choose and being empowered to pick from all of those resources. What's the best way I'm going to learn? What's the best takeaway? Like, that's, culturally, they'll have different languages available for them, or even like Google Translate. That's something that's already embedded within your accessibilities in most of our devices. That's something, letting them know and teaching them what you have available. These are your resources. I think empowering the students is the best thing to do, and also the parents. Oftentimes in our schools, the parents are not aware of this type of information. So it's also providing that awareness to them as well.
Magali, I love that you mentioned parents, in your experience and everyone's experience here. How can these practices help to get parents and the family more involved? I guess I'd just love to hear your experience and your thoughts on getting parents and family involved, especially in this lens of cultural responsiveness. And Magali, if you'd want to start, that'd be great. If not, anybody can hop in.
For parents, is just like, for what works with what I do is, just letting them know, providing like flyers, logins of like, this is your student's Bookshare login. Hey, this event is going on within the school district. This is what other students are doing. So just making them aware and providing that information through email, through handouts. That's the best way to do it, and honestly, there's different type of parents that are very involved, and there's other parents that are not. So it just really depends. And I feel like as long as we do our due diligence, that's the best thing that we can really do. And then the students being motivated to want to use it, they'll, advocate to their parents, like, I want to be part of this. So it's just something that the students have to be very highly motivated as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'll add on to that, speaking of systems of, you have to remember that a lot of our parents or our, guardians of our children, our caretakers, they've experienced an education system that made them feel less than, that made them feel inferior. And purposely made them feel like you don't belong in this Americanized version of education. You don't fit. So to say, hey, come to our school and come to open house and learn about these things, that's challenging, and that's one of the systems we need to know, like that's a real thing that existed. And as a teacher, as long as we know it, now we can start working around it, right? We need to start finding ways to welcome them back into our school that makes them feel like, for example, nothing bothers me more when I hear other educators, and I have said this myself in my earlier days of educating, the parents don't care. They don't show up to open house. They don't show up to this. They don't show up to that. And that was in my younger years of teaching because I didn't understand the systems at play. I didn't understand everything happening that's influencing a parent might not be able to come. So I don't have the great answer, but I do know maybe it's meeting on common ground, right? Having parent events that aren't held in a school building. Having parent events at sporting events, right? Maybe before, maybe after. We just have to get really creative. So that's my take on how do we get communities back involved. We have to make them feel valued first, as they are.
Oh, there you go.
I wholeheartedly agree with Kim and Magali. Welcome the parents back. We have created a system in which parents do not feel welcome. And so they allow the students to be the captain when it comes to education because they don't feel comfortable. We think about students or parents who speak various languages. They don't necessarily have translators within the schools. So when a parent goes, they have no one to speak to. They have no one to translate unless their child is there and able to translate. And that becomes a very uncomfortable experience. When we invite parents out, we are more of telling them what we want from them to do versus including them in what needs to be done to support their child. And so with every adult, we don't like to be told what to do, but we like to be a part of what's important. And changing that idea of how we address and bring parents into the school is essential in building that parent and community-based relationships within the schools and the community. Like I said, and we talked about this, we utilized an example, multicultural fairs. We have it one day, but we don't continue this to be a cycle. So we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. After that month, what do we do? How do we continue to build that culture in? What bridges do we build? Okay, you're a great chef. Okay, what can you do? What can you tell about our health option? Do you garden? What do you do? Continue that cycle. Utilize your parents in the community to make them feel valued. And of course, like we don't know them, so they don't feel valued. When you don't know people, you don't make them of value. And so simply just building those relationships. It's all about relationship building, acceptance, as well as welcoming in and making them feel comfortable.
Thanks, Lakita. There have been some great thoughts put in the chat about this as well, that are just kind of highlighting some of the things that you're saying as well. You know, in the same way that we advocate for various student needs, those needs exist for parents and families. We can't assume anything about families. And I've lost it. A lot of info's coming in here, but kind of echoing things that you've said when we're talking about events that are really reaching out to parents. You know, is that one day cultural fair held during only school normal working hours? Is it held at a time that parents can actually join? Are those things always related to education, or can they be community building? And so just a lot of great thoughts in the chat as well as you all are talking. When we're thinking about families and their relationship with students, someone in the chat earlier put in a really interesting comment that I would love to hear your thoughts on. And I'm just going to read the comment and then would love to hear your thoughts. So they said, I instruct at-risk youth that are 16 to 24 years of age. There are many cultures within cultures dealing with these students. Every Friday, they do leadership skills building through community outreach. they build their confidence and pride, giving back to their own communities. And my question here is kind of just, what are your thoughts on this? And how can we be preparing students to be leaders within their own communities and within their own cultures and their own schools? I'll stop there. Would love to hear thoughts on that.
I would love to speak with to that. Since my first year of teaching, I've been teaching 17 years, and I've been dealing with at-risk youth. My first year of teaching, I had to organize a GED program within all schools. And the principal simply told me, you're going to have the students who are overage. We want them in school one more year, and we're going to kick them out. And so how can you do that to children? And so this kind of fueled my fire to deal with students of at-risk youth. And I think that this is exactly what needs to be done in our community, because they do get in trouble. They do not excel well in schools because they have no sense of community. They have no one to teach them about a sense of community or pride or those leadership skills. Because of course, if you know, with our at-risk youth, those are your leaders. But no one has taken the time to develop those leadership skills, and they tend to go, use them more negatively than positive. But if you provide those positive structures, those positive avenues, it is just amazing what these students can do. And so just, you have to build it, because we see them, we deem them as nuisance, instead of taking those qualities that they have and putting them in a positive environment in which they can grow. So I really like that, Joan, that comment in that program that you're giving back and help those students with community outreach. I really love it. And I think that is the perfect way to begin, transforming your community, transforming the students, and building those relationships. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, Lakita, I know we were best friends in another life, and we're gonna be best friends now. Like, I know it. Like, when you talk, I just want to hold my heart, both of you. Like, these are my people. I first want to start by saying we have been part of an education system that has put a system in place to sort and value, or sort and devalue, right? Like, we are a sorting machine, and that was built. I mean, I'm not making this up. You can look at the history, right? Like, it was standardized testing. It was to sort people from military. Then it got into our education system. Then it was sorted of who would be the factory worker, who would be the CEO, like sorts, manual labor, blue collar, white collar. Like, that's the vehicle of education, down to sorting. Then we're spread to theorists, who really, there was poor research in those, and you should really examine the research you were taught as a teacher. But then we start sorting kids of, oh, you're a kid who needs shelter first. You're a kid who needs food and water first. Like, instead of this model that many of our ancestors and elders had of agency, we all have it. We don't need to wait for someone to give it to us, but yet the school system has created this pyramid of only certain people get to self-actualization, and that's incorrect. We know that self-actualization is within each of us, and it's in with each of our students. But then we tell kids, like the students you're talking about, our opportunity youth, because you can't do this, you can't be a leader. When actually they'll probably be the best leader, right? Like, they don't care who tells them what. They can say it how it is, like, and they have seen a lot. They have seen a lot, so they have a lot of insight into how to fix it. So how do we do it? That's a big ask, but we have come across some new ways of how to do it. We set up local graduate profiles, not statewide, sometimes not district-wide, but high school graduate profiles. This is what the community feels is what a graduate from this community is. And then we start tying assessments or outcomes to those. So if you say it's in adaptability, if it's critical thinking, we start tying outcomes to those. And then we can start tying assessments to those that go beyond the traditional method of science, social studies, math. And in those those are capstones. And in those capstones, our students design social change projects, right? What's meaningful to them? What's special to them? What can they change in their community? And we start giving them their agency back. Like, you don't have to wait for us adults to fix it because we're screwing up things left and right. You guys do it. And then we start community organizing. We can start funding those projects instead of funding these materials that are making our kids literally leave the schools.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel is the starting point. Graduate profiles, local, and then capstones. And then capstones can be done all the way to elementary school too.
Yeah. What an exciting model to think about. If, you know, if at large scale, this could be adopted. And I know Kim and you and many others are diligently working on this day in and day out. And yeah, just really exciting. We are coming kind of down to the end of our time already, which is wild. These hours go so fast. I know that what we are talking about today, as we've highlighted, is a really complex conversation, complex issues, complex solutions, complex conversation. But I would love to hear from each of you, like, what are some concrete steps that somebody who's in this conversation today can take as when they leave this room? What are some concrete steps that they could take away with them?
I would say start at the most minute area. Number one, really invest in what is cultural responsiveness. Change your own thinking about what is cultural responsiveness. Just from our first conversation, I had to shift a little of my thinking in the way I do things. And it's just awareness and just education first in your own thinking. And so I would say start by reading one journal a day on cultural responsiveness and just try to change those things that you are doing. And hopefully the person to the left and the right of you are watching you and begin to wonder why you're making these changes and start a bigger conversation so that they too can make the same changes. So I just say educate yourself on that in your actions. That's the very first starting point.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lakita.
I think that's a great starting point. And then I would also start with myself of reflecting on what is learning. What's the definition of learning to me? And then for my students. And I am a special educator. Like, I taught in special education classroom. That's my passion. That's why I continue to drive this work. And start defining what's learning, and then look at intersectionality, really learn what that is in our marginalized groups, which also includes our students with mental health struggles. It also includes our students with learning disabilities, right? And then realize what's within your control to break down those barriers. And I am not being paid by Bookshare at all, but I think Bookshare, so I'm not plugging them, but Bookshare I'm passionate about it because that will break down a barrier. Just having a book decode for you, so your brain can get past that and do all the brilliance that you have and get there. That is a starting point, but there's other tools that can help your students remove those barriers that has put them on the margins of you don't fit in this box. And it's just like, let's just get rid of the box. So those two things are my move.
Love
Reflect
it.
on, redefine learning, and understand where to break down barriers. That's within your control.
Amazing. Thank you. And Magali would love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think educate yourself about it and ask questions, ask your administration. You know, I think everything starts little by little, and even with your students, have this conversation with them, have them question within themselves also to spark this type of conversations, because I don't think there really is a right or wrong answer. So I think having these conversations with them would be very crucial, but education is first thing, like Lakita mentioned. I think that's the most important.